See, there is creation and there is creativity. Two words that are very close to each other in meaning, but in our minds, they are as far away from each other as they can be. We never think about creation and creativity in same terms. Why? They're same words used in a slightly different way. One is referring to what has been created. Creation refers to what is already created, and creativity refers to the process of creation. And yet, we never put these two words together. When we talk about creativity, we talk about human creativity. We talk about singing, we talk about dancing, we talk about painting, writing, architecture, literature. And when we talk about creation, we talk about God, His divine plan, how we are created in His image. Not just Christianity, every religion talks about creation as something that is flowing from God, from His will, from His mind. And when we talk about God, we don't talk about creativity. We don't talk about God as what a creative being He is. Because creation for us is separate from creativity. This divide is what is separating you from fully connecting with your creative nature and also realizing that you are the creator of your life. Both the idea of creation and creativity have to come together for you to fully experience life as both your creation and an outflowing of your creative energies. Who is creating? See, God is one of the most childish of human inventions. The very idea is childish. It does not fit logically. It does not fit scientifically. It does not make sense intuitively. Unless you are choosing to be blind to glaring, glowing realities of life, you cannot believe in God. You have to shut yourself off from certain truths that you experience on a daily basis, on a moment-to-moment basis. Unless you are willing to do that, you cannot entertain the idea of God. Up until now, the human society has been dominated by the idea of God, or rather, God has dominated the human consciousness because human consciousness has lived in ignorance. Literacy, the sheer explosion of information, knowledge, understanding, our understanding of the human body, our understanding of the mind, our understanding of the world, it's all a modern phenomenon. Last few hundred years. You go back a few hundred years, it's all God. Everything is explained through Him. Because we didn't have access to the things that we have now. We didn't have our refined ways of inquiring. And those who were inquiring were always pushed to the sidelines. There were scientists, there were mystics, there were philosophers, but they were never mainstream. It was always the preacher It was always the religion that was occupying the mainstream society. An ordinary man is first introduced to religion, first introduced to ideas of God. Only when those ideas are deeply entrenched and when you are fully certain that these ideas cannot be removed now, then you introduce logic, science, reasoning as a supplement because it's practical. You can see the practical usefulness of logic and reasoning, so you entertain it. But it never becomes the central pillar on which your life stands. It's always on the sidelines. And that is why every time you think about being creative, you always think about the periphery. What is it that I can do to be creative? What are all the different things I can do? But you never go to the center, which is creation itself. Creativity and creation cannot be separate. Up until now, there has been a deliberate effort to keep it separate. And that is the divide in the human consciousness. Because every time you go deeper into inquiring into the nature of your creativity, somewhere this idea of God and a fixed creation stops you. Okay, let us for a moment assume that there is a God. Okay, he decides to create. For whatever reason, something comes to his mind, he decides to create the whole world. He takes 6 days or 5.5 days, it doesn't matter. He creates the world. And then what does he do? If the purpose of God is creation, there is no meaning to the idea of God if there is no creation. Imagine if you were to meet God and if you were to ask him, what did you create? Or why are you a God? And if he says, I don't know, I did not create anything, then how is he a God? So God and creation in our minds is one. God has to create. He is the creator. That is why we call him God. Now, if the very purpose of God is to create, what happens to that purpose after he creates? How can he still remain God after creating? His purpose is done. What is he doing? Sitting in his chair and watching everything? Doing maintenance job? Oh, this requires a little bit of painting here. Oh, I need to do some plumbing work here. What is he doing? Because the creation is done. Life is overflowing in every which way. What is the work of the Creator? What is the necessity of God? Even for a moment, if we assume that yes, God created the universe, He is the first mover, He is the primary mover, fine. What is the necessity to remember Him? What is the necessity to drag Him into each and every one of our affairs? In fact, He didn't want to be a part of our affairs. That's why He created us and left us alone. Otherwise, He would have been interfering every moment. He would have given birth, not a mother. Who gives birth? Where does the child come from? The child does not drop from the heavens. Suddenly he does not appear from the earth. And if God were to interfere with the process of creation, He would have at least kept that much to Himself. Rest, everything happened by itself, but let me create a human being. Let me take control of that department so that human beings know that they cannot create. They don't have the power to create. But what is the reality? A mother creates a baby inside her. She just uses the energy of the man. A man and woman are enough to create. Whether you believe in God or not, if you have sex, if you want to have a child, you will have a child. You can deny God and still produce a child. You can be an atheist and produce a child. You can be a religious guy and produce a child. It's totally independent of belief in God. And that is the birthplace of creativity. There can be nothing more creative than giving birth to another human being. God is nowhere in that picture. Even if we were to assume that God was the first mover, the primary mover, because we don't know where all these things come from. We are trying to understand. Scientifically, we're trying to understand, oh, there was a Big Bang. And still you can argue what was before the Big Bang. Because there is ignorance, there is always a possibility of adding an unknown entity in the beginning of creation. You call it God, you call it him, you call it her, you call it, whatever you want. That much is allowed. But that is not how we treat God. That is not how religions have treated God. For religions, God is a living entity who is watching us every moment, who is judging our actions, and who will decide what happens to us after we die. He decides whether we go to heaven or hell. This is a completely ridiculous, childish idea. Somewhere there has to be a basic separation between our quest to know creation and the creative energy and the need to put our responsibility onto something else. These are two completely different things. Believing in a living God who's watching us, who's observing us, is putting the responsibility of creation, putting the responsibility of our lives, our growth, our spiritual liberation onto something else. Believing in the primary mover, the first act of creation, whether you believe it was by God or some other entity, it is immaterial. There, you can entertain the idea of God at least a little bit because there's unknown. If someone says, I don't know who created the universe, let me just believe that God created it, that is where your discussion should end about God. You cannot make him the moral authority for human lives. He cannot be the judge and arbitrator. And he cannot choose where you go after you die and what happens to you. He should have no say in human affairs. Just imagine how everything changes for a moment if you can assume that there is no such thing called as God. All religions have vanished. You are free to explore life in every which way you can. You can go to the very depths of inquiry. There's nobody stopping you now. And we have reached that point. God is simply an idea now, which has to be sooner or later dropped. We are holding on to him reluctantly because we haven't started deeper inquiries into the nature of our being. We are still busy doing other things in life. So somewhere, because we have not taken full responsibility for life, we are still holding on to that idea. But the day we take full responsibility and say, this is my life, let me understand it from inside, then you will start watching your creative energies. Because that is where, if you want to use the term God, that is where God is. In what you're creating. And how can he be outside? He cannot be outside. If you can turn every moment of your creative life, not just creativity, your very living is a creative process. Every moment you are creating your reality through your thoughts, through your imagination, through your likes and dislikes, through your conscious involvement, you are creating your life. There is no external entity. Drop that burden. Drop that responsibility. Drop that trying to satisfy an external entity. That is simply a deviation that has kept man very far away from his true search. When you drop that, you have to start watching your creation. Otherwise, life will be chaotic. And that is why humanity has lived in so much of chaos, so much of pain. That is why there is so much of violence, so many wars, so much of injustice. Because we put the responsibility outside us. And then we said, somebody is going to judge us. And as long as I can carefully, artfully use words to define my experience so that I'm satisfying my God, I can go ahead and do whatever the nonsense I want to do in this world. Think about it. God tells Abraham, to show your loyalty to me, I want you to burn your son on the altar. I want you to offer him as a burnt sacrifice. And Abraham takes his son to the hilltop and he ties him up and he is about to kill him. And then it is said that the God interferes and says, now you have proved your allegiance to me. Now you have proved your loyalty to me. You don't have to kill him. What a stupid story. And these are the stories that have dominated the human mind. And what is the definition of the word Holocaust? Burnt offering. Where do you think that idiot Hitler got the idea of sacrifice? Where do you think he had the vision and he had the guts to imagine that he can sacrifice a group of people and be closer to God? Because of these stupid ideas. If God can sacrifice, if God can ask for your son as a burnt offering, then maybe he'll be more pleased if I offer all these Jews to him. Not one in millions. Burnt offering. That is what Holocaust means. Religion has created so much destruction. Inside, outside. It has divided man. It has divided him from nature. It has put him in a completely different space where he can do whatever he wants against the will of nature, against the will of life, and just word your life cleverly to satisfy the God. That's enough. Then you can go on doing whatever you want. You don't have to watch your mind. You don't have to watch your body. You don't have to watch what you're doing to other people. You don't have to watch how you're treating animals. Nothing. Just cleverly word yourself. Go sprinkle some water. That's enough. Go confess your sins. And if that idiot sitting in that telephone booth, if he tells you, yes, your sins are, we have accepted, now you are ready to go to heaven, you can go. Maybe a little bit of donation. All that nonsense is what has kept humanity in the state that one look at the world. We know what has happened to the human race. Where did we falter? The first step, we faltered on the first step of self-inquiry. We put a step and we called it God and we became afraid to step on it. Self-inquiry ended right there. Because how can I step on God? Because it's just a step. You have to step on him. You have to trample on him to go ahead and discover the true nature of your being. And people have been afraid. Meditation, going deeper, realizing the truth. My God, what is all this? How? It's not in the Bible. All they are telling me is just believe. And if I can believe, it's enough. Why the hell do I have to worry about meditation if I can simply believe? I don't have to take responsibility. Creativity, creation, creative meditation is all about taking responsibility. And watch every moment of what you're creating because you are the creator. God is the first hurdle. You break through that, the whole universe is waiting there. That's it. No scriptures, no logic, no reasoning, nothing is required. Just a pure scientific attitude. Because even logic and reasoning, we have applied too much to religion, too much to theology. But it's all nonsense at the end of the day. it is not enough to simply drop the idea of God. You have to drop the whole process. There are a lot of people who have dropped the idea of God, but they have not gone into self-inquiry. Dropping the idea of God also implies taking the responsibility for knowing life from inside. Just choosing to be an atheist is not enough, because you're still in the same mold of mind. You are only choosing to be an atheist because you don't want to be a believer in God. It's only a response. It cannot be a response. The rejection has to be something from inside, not just an ideological or a theological response. Oh, here are people who believe in God. They are stupid. I don't believe in God, so I must be smart. It's not that kind of believing. It is something that surges from inside, that makes you reject the idea of an external creator so fully that you have to accept the fact that you are the creator and you have to watch your life.